Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Big East Rewind. I'm Chuck Everson, your host from Villanova, and my partner, as always, the great Sonny Sparrow from Syracuse University. How are you, Sonny?
I'm great, Chuck. Got my guy on today, man. Got my
Yeah, this
boy.
should be fun. This should be fun. And your old roomie, right? And
Yep.
That's
Yep.
right.
it'll be good to reunite the roommates, just like Jalen Brunson and Josh Hart. We've got you and your roommate. So.
Now when roommate, that's not just my traveling roommate. We were roommates in the dorm for a full year.
Oh, I
That's
know.
right.
This
I
poor
As
know.
did
guy
mine.
got to live with me off the court.
Josh and Jalen have
He
got the roommates
survived.
podcast. We've got our version of that right here on the Big East Rewind. And if you didn't notice, Sonny, speaking of the Big East Rewind, I'm in the new studio for the Big East Rewind. Did you see that?
I did. You got me all hooked up with our
With our
latest
yeah, listen,
renditions of your
we're looking
artwork.
to put out some gear, and these
Yep.
are a few of the options. We're just trying to brainwash everybody into checking out what we have to offer. And so we're in the middle of putting it together now. So if there anything that you see behind Sonny's head that is absolutely horrific and you don't want it to do anything, tell us. And if you see anything that's great, tell us that too. So um, you can leave it in the comments on YouTube or wherever you get the podcast from. So, all of that business out of the way, Sonny, let's have some fun with your roommate from
Absolutely.
Syracuse, okay? So, this guy was a Syracuse power forward from 81 to 84. He scored 851 points, Sonny, and grabbed
Hmm.
433 boards. He was the Syracuse letter winner of distinction, as was yourself, right? And that's for work after graduating the basketball and after graduating from Syracuse.
Yep.
He was also a Vic Hansen Medal of Honor winner, Sonny. Okay,
Hmm.
and he was very, very successful in business after his career at Syracuse. The former president and CEO of Arrow Electronics, but he's best known as the roommate of our own Sonny Sparrow, the great Sean Kerns is with us. How are you,
You
Sean?
poor guy.
So,
Well, thanks, guys. Thanks for that warm welcome, Chuck. It's great to be here.
yeah, well, it's good to
You know
see you
what, Chuck?
again.
Chuck, it sounded much better, the Letterman of distinction, if you just said Sean got it. But when you put me in there, you just
Listen,
just probably
listen,
dragged
okay.
him down a little.
Listen, I'm going to brag on my partner for a second, Sean,
You just
okay?
brought
The
it
guy
down a
has
little,
done,
man.
as you guys have both done great things outside of basketball. Sonny, with what you do with your, day of service, you give out free dental service, and you're up to how many million of dollars of the service that you've given away over the years. So I know you're too humble to talk about it yourself, so I'll do that for you. You guys do a great job. And Sean does the same thing, does stuff for the community, and is always charitable in everything that he does. And
Yep,
so, and
very
listen,
much.
the letter winner of distinction was both earned by both you guys and both well deserved. So there you go.
Well,
Hats off. Okay.
well, thank you, Chuck. And back to the comment Sonny made about being roommates. He's right. Where my head first went was the fact that we roomed on the road for 3 years for all the away games. But then we also lived together one year, Sonny's freshman year. I think it was the 17th floor, Sonny, at Lawrenson. I know it was
We were in the
Lawrenson.
ninth, and then we moved to the 16th on the corner.
There you go.
We got
There you
that
go.
corner room.
Yeah. The
Well,
corner
I
room was
I know it was up there because on my visit I stayed there. With you guys. My infamous visit to Syracuse back in the day. So,
well, as I said earlier, it must have been such a lousy visit. We didn't do a great job because you chose elsewhere, Chuck.
well, listen, and it's funny. Sonny and I joke around about this all the time. And Sonny has lost Jay Billis, myself, and Harold Jensen were under Sonny's tutelage, and he failed in all three things. We had Coach B on, and B fired him on the spot. So Coach
Yeah,
B,
just so you know, Sean, my
that's it,
job was
Sonny, you're
over
done.
sophomore year. They were like, no more recruits for you.
That's it.
I remember Marty Head giving me a hard time my freshman year. I forget who I hosted, and they were all worried that the guy would have a lousy time because all I would do is take him to Burger King. They go, Coach, get somebody else if you want the kid to have fun.
Yeah. Well, listen, both you guys were, kept the GPA up on your team, that's for sure. So I'm sure you guys were doing a lot of studying, and that's probably why guys didn't have a great time down there. Not that you can not have a good time at Syracuse. Marshall Street was something else back in the day. I remember Sutter's
Yes, it
Mill,
was.
and the
Sutter.
library was in that hotel, right, Sonny?
Yep.
Remember when we played you guys, we would stay there, and you would
Hotel
you would
Syracuse.
call home and tell, I'm going to the library, but you weren't lying. But we were there in the bar called the library. It was great.
Where did you guys stay, Chuck, when you were in town?
Whatever that hotel was, it was right on Marshall Street, I think. It was
Oh, wow.
the Hyatt.
Oh, there was a Sheridan there, maybe.
Sure, yeah, maybe
Yeah,
it was
okay.
that one.
I
It
forget
was
when they
right
built
down
that.
there because you could walk half
Was
a
it a
block and be at Sutter's.
was it a round hotel?
I think so. Yeah,
Yeah, that was the one
Ah,
down
yeah,
off Genesee. Yeah.
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 That's
That's
been
down the
about
hill a little
8,000
bit.
names. Crown, been a million
Yeah,
different.
that's exactly right.
Yeah.
So, yeah, and then, of course, you had Varsity's Pizza down there, and walking around checking out all the Pearl Washington t-shirts that on the eighth day God created the Pearl shirts, and they had all kinds of stuff down there on Marshall Street back then. So, and as you talk about it a lot, Sonny, I mean, it's not changed much, but now they're doing some construction, right? I mean, is he gone now? Is he still there?
Varsity's still there, but it's slated to go.
It
Is
is,
it
right?
really? Wow, you
Yeah.
just taught me something I didn't know. That's iconic. Of all the
Right?
places that have
I
come and
can't
gone
believe
there,
it. The
they
ownership
survived the
changed.
change in drinking age and the whole thing. It's been a
Yeah.
bedrock. Are they going out of business, Sonny, or just relocating?
I don't know if they're coming back, but I heard that that's going to be taken over and made like a little retail and then apartments above it, just like they did where Sutter's was. They took all that out and they put,
Oh my goodness.
but
Yeah.
they relocated Hungry Chuck's and they brought that Hungry Charlie's they brought over somewhere on Marshall Street. They took it out of the basement back there. But yeah, the Varsity, I've heard and I haven't seen it moving, but I do know that the ownership changed. The Dulles family are no longer owning it, but it's supposed to move.
I guess if you live long enough, all your institutions either change or go away altogether, huh?
It's scary.
Yeah.
I know.
Imagine.
That was one thing. Every time I go back up, I try to hit it and just get a pie and you can't help you because you sit at big long tables with everybody. It's not like
Yeah.
you have six booths maybe. Everybody else you're just cafeteria style.
I got to tell you, a friend of mine, his son now goes to Syracuse, and he was back for a visit or recently back to pick him up and bring him back home. And he was in the varsity, and he took a picture of all the great players that are featured on the wall. And this picture, I believe, happened to be of Martha Mogish.
Oh yeah, still up. Yeah.
Great, great women's basketball player for Syracuse. And I guess, the way the shot played out, he sent it to me. He kind of thought it might be me. And so he sent me a picture of it and said, "Hey, is this you on the wall?" And I said, "No, that's not me."
I don't think you want to tell that story, man.
I don't think I'm great, up to Martha's caliber.
Yeah. I mean, listen, it was always a fun time there, except when we had to actually get on the court with you guys, because as Sonny and I have discussed numerous times, it was we never won a game in that place, and for whatever reason, I guess, I would tell you, looking into a sea of orange and then trying to find an orange rim in a sea of orange was tough. But man, it was a challenge, every time we went there. Besides, you guys was so good back in the day. It was, always a great game. And it just seems that we beat you guys in Philly and you guys beat us up there at the Dome. That's always been a tough spot.
I'd love to see the stats to see, what home court advantage really means in terms of wins and losses. But back then, I remember the crowds were so large that I got to believe it was a tough place to play. We were kind of used to it because, most off days we would practice, there, I think far more than we did in Manly, right, Sonny? And so, the depth perception, all the things that teams that never play there suffer from, we were kind of used to because we did have so much practice time there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, the one thing I remember is you guys had the greatest spread after a game of any team in the Big East, man. They had these What was the sandwich place called down there? There was a big sandwich place that Boeheim used to take all the recruits to.
Oh, I used to take everybody to that. What was that German place, Sean? Danzer's.
Oh, Danzers.
Kansas.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
phenomenal,
they had stuff from those guys. They had all these kinds of, so
phenomenal sandwiches. Yeah.
everybody took their, fixins and took it back to the hotel because we never flew out after we played. We always stayed the night and then flew out the next day when we played you guys. But
Well, we all played back in the day when it was strictly commercial, right? So
yeah, right.
you weren't getting a flight to Philly out of
Right.
Syracuse at 11 o'clock at night.
No,
Now you
no.
get home in an hour.
Yep,
Yeah.
exactly. Yep, exactly. So, yeah, but those days were fun, and and that place was raucous, and there was people there. You had Dome Eddie running around, the Dome Ranger. You had all these people doing their thing, and it was a great, great, great college atmosphere to go to a game. Never mind playing in it, but I've been there for games as well, and it's a cool environment to go check out a game when you go into that place.
One of my fondest memories is, leading the team out onto the floor in front of 25, 28, 30, 32,000. I think back about it and you never get tired of it, right? It was always just, kind of a moment where you got chills
Yeah.
every time you went on the floor. And, that was the sign of the times. And I think also part of the reason was the team was pretty damn good most years. And so the fans were there. They turned out in droves.
So let's go back a half a step, Sean. Talk about playing at Union Endicott with Sonny, and I think we were talking prior to coming on. I think you guys played only 1 year together in high school, Sonny,
1 year. Yeah.
but you're only 1 year apart. So how did that work?
Well, Sean was exceptional, right? So when Sean came over, Sean made his bones initially in the Catholic schools. So when Sean decided to come to high school in Endicott to go now back to the public school, that was a huge windfall for us, okay, and our program. And Sean was exceptional, and Sean played varsity sophomore year on, and
Yes.
Mike Zanicki played freshman year on, but they were the two bigs that they played. And I was a point guard, and the point guard ahead of me was exceptional, Bobby Mastro. So I played JV as a sophomore.
Wow. For a second, I was saying, wait a minute, Sonny. I thought Coach Terracone brought you up as a sophomore as well, but I guess not.
Nope.
Maybe they
Nope, I
figured
stayed
you
on
wouldn't get enough
JV.
time.
Hayes was in front of me. Hayes was great. I mean, I wouldn't have played much. So, really helped me out. And I never had a beef about it. Like today, in today's days and age, man, parents would be all over the coach's tail. Like, you're not
Yeah.
bringing my kid up. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
it's just a different time. But yeah, 1 year with Sean, I watched him all those years. And
Wow.
I was
Wow.
a manager when he was on the sixth grade CYO team. It was him, Hayes, and a bunch of other guys. And they dominated the Catholic League in sixth, seventh, and eighth grade. So
Yeah,
I
Chuck,
knew it was going to be big.
it was kind of a perfect storm where, there was all these young families and young kids all growing up together, all playing outdoors all the time. A bunch of us found basketball and just kept playing and playing and playing. So it was kind of a bonanza for coaches because they had a lot of young kids coming up, and the coaches then would look at who's in the fifth grade and the sixth grade and the seventh grade, and then plot a path all the way through senior year in high school. And now that you mention it, Sonny, I gotta believe Coach Terracone and Coach Cheer, the JV coach at the time, probably had a conversation to say, Sonny's ready for the varsity, but he may not get enough playing time. He's better off on JVs.
Mm-hmm.
So he gets a lot of game time, before he comes up. So, but you're right. I didn't even notice. I thought you were on the team then too.
No, it was, in retrospect, it was a great move, and I didn't think twice about it. I was playing with all my buddies. What was the difference, But it was fun watching.
A lot of fun. It was a lot
And
of
Sean
fun.
lived right down, we were on the same street. Sean lived a block and a half from me.
Oh, really?
But he was two doors
That's
away
right.
from he was 2 doors away from the other school district.
Yeah,
Really?
the way they drew the school district lines, I'll have no idea. But most of us on the team, my junior year and my senior year, lived a lot closer to a school named Maine Endwell. Literally, some of us lived in homes where we could see it than than we did Union Endicott, where we, had to go to school based on just where the district lines were drawn. Go figure. But Sonny's right. I went to, parochial school at St. Joseph's, which has long since closed. But back in the day, there was a Catholic high school right in Endicott called Seton, and they closed it during my eighth grade year at St. Joseph's. And so my parents decided, hey, we're not putting you on a bus to send you across town to the only other Catholic high school in the area. Time for you to go to the public school, Union Endicott, which at first was an awesome experience because I went from a class of 22 and became a class of over 600. So I remember my freshman year feeling like, I was kind of lost for a few months. Thankfully, there was basketball, something I could latch onto and really find my way. But, back then, great school, great facilities, great resources, great teachers, great coaches, and it worked out. It worked out fantastically. So lots of fond memories from our time together at UE.
Sean
Go
had,
ahead, John. Go ahead, Sonny.
Sean's work ethic was second to none. Sean was the first person that I saw that had his heart and soul into the game 365 to 24/7. Like he worked on his body, he worked on his game. He went from, that tall, skinny kid who maybe didn't have the best coordination to just a physical specimen and stud. And he continued to grow, right? Sean, didn't you grow a little bit in college too?
I did. Yeah, I probably left UE and I was 6'8", or darn near. And I think by the end of my freshman year, early sophomore year at Syracuse, I probably topped out at 6'9".
Yeah.
So there was still some growth left. And thank you, Sonny, for saying that. I mean, I think we all worked hard. But I did put a lot of time into the game. I knew that, it was necessary, because I probably wasn't the most talented player in the world. But it was also fun, because, we just loved to play. And we had coaches that really imposed a lot of discipline and set high expectations. And, I never wanted to let them down. So there was a little bit of that too. But, for whatever I did or didn't do, I'm sure most of it helped along the way. And hey, it got me to Syracuse, so I'm not complaining.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, and the other part, I'm going to put the other aspect of this on the student athlete, which I was fortunate to room my freshman year, right? How freshman year you can go any way because you have so much free time, right? Well, I had a roommate who was serious about school, so it made me say, "Oh, well, this is what Sean's doing. I should be doing something at least close to what he's doing." So I spent more time studying and less time hooking up with the different people on our dorm floor, going to, the Odyssey or, what was it? What was that place on Erie Boulevard? It was a big disco place, and
Oh, yeah. I think I know what you're talking about. I forget the name.
There was always a group going there, and you could have went every night of the week. And I was just like, man, we just did that on Friday and Saturday, and then I was like, well, I got to play basketball too. So I started off a lot better than a lot of my freshman classmates because I had Sean right there.
Well, Sonny, you're being humble. You were a good student as well. He applied himself right from the start. I never thought there was any other option. My parents were just big believers in education.
Mm-hmm.
My father said, I want you to play as hard as you can and go as far as you can, but you damn well better get a good degree.
Mm-hmm.
And so he was not going to relent on that. So I think I kind of didn't want to let him down either. And so it was mostly natural. I did sign up for an engineering program. There's times I look back on that and say, maybe I should have rethought that a little bit. It might have been a little easier for me if I, took on another curriculum, but it all worked out.
Industrial engineering too, no joke.
Yeah, it was not a picnic, and it probably cost me a little bit of time, for working out and for practice, especially in my junior year. But in retrospect, I wouldn't have done it any differently.
who was involved with your recruitment, Sean, and why Syracuse? Was it you just wanted to stay close to home, or what was the story there?
That's a good question, Chuck. If you go back to 1978, 1979, 79, 80 was my senior year in high school. Syracuse was probably, ranked in the top five, most of both seasons. In fact, I think at some point during that year, they were ranked number one. they had Roosevelt and Lewis, and they had just beat Purdue with Joe Barry Carroll. And so imagine you grow up 90 miles away from Syracuse, and they offer you a scholarship. It's kind of like growing up 75 miles away from Columbus, Ohio, and not playing football at Ohio State, right?
Right.
So there was a lot of that was really
Yeah.
overlooked. It felt like the bar or the brass ring that you had to reach for. I had offers to smaller schools, and I was really enamored with many of those. But in the end, I think I felt like if I didn't go to Syracuse, I would always wonder, if I could have played at that level. And so I didn't let myself off the hook in that way.
Yeah, that's great. And was Bernie the guy that recruited you, or was it Malone, or who was? How did it work?
It was mainly Bernie. I ended up seeing a fair amount of Brendan, towards the end of the process,
Yeah.
and Coach Boeheim once or twice, but he let Bernie and Brendan do most of the work, and they were pretty faithful about showing up for just about every game they could show up for, and just about every camp they could show up for. They were pretty relentless. This is back before they had lots of restrictions on when you could talk to kids or when you
Right.
could, but they were pretty respectful of my parents and our high school coach, Sonny, and my high school coach, and they were there 99 times out of 100. And I just felt like, hey, I knew it would be a little bit of a challenge to be able to play at that level. And I'd be lying if I said there aren't days I wonder, hey, gee, if I had gone to St. Bonaventure or played at William and Mary, I probably would have been a 2 or 3 or 4 year starter versus a 1 year starter. But I don't think I would do it differently. It was worth it to see if I could kind of play and compete with guys and teams of that caliber.
And because Sean got recruited, that's where they saw me. I mean, I, I wasn't on anybody's radar, but I played with Sean as a junior, and 6'5" point guard became an attraction, and that's how they recruited me. It's plain and simple. Boeheim saw me, so I played with Sean.
Wow.
Yeah, it was great.
2 for 1.
It
Who
worked
knew?
out great. And recruiting wasn't so digital and so transparent the way it is today. I mean, there are no
Yeah.
secrets today. They'll find a kid, in diapers, and they'll already know whether or not he's going to be capable to play D1.
Right.
Back
Right.
then, you had to work lists and make phone calls and hear
Yeah.
from coaches and other people with referrals, and otherwise you just weren't guaranteed to get a good look.
Yeah.
Yeah, especially
Coach
not in a
Boeheim-
metropolitan area, right?
You had guys like Tom
Yeah.
Konchowski to make sure your name got out there, and the other guy. Who was the other guy that had that
It was
list?
Garfinkel, Howie.
Yeah,
Yes.
there was another guy that had a list. Konchowski was the big guy in the Northeast. He went everywhere, and if he said you were good, you're good, and that's it. And that's how a lot of guys got recruited, especially in the New York area. He was everywhere, and
Well,
never drove a car, and still got to all these games. It was amazing.
it is amazing. And I remember, I went to a bunch of basketball camps after my freshman, sophomore, and junior year, but I never went to 5-star. And it wasn't a conscious decision to avoid it. I don't know if it was by invite only then or not, but
Yeah.
I remember Coach Boeheim telling me, and it was probably part of the recruiting process, but he said, hey, had you gone to 5-star, you would have been that much more visible and you would have had plenty more offers. Don't worry. But, that probably just would have made the process even that much more confusing than it was, because I struggle with the decision a little bit, because you don't want to make a mistake, and when you're 18 years old, it's a lot to sort out. But like I said, it worked out, and I would never have done it differently.
Yeah, it sure did. It sure
But
did.
but it was also, Sean, it was new for you. It was also new for Coach Terracone. He didn't have a player that was recruited like that.
That's a great point. Yeah, that's a great
Yeah.
point. He didn't have a lot of that experience, and he was pretty old school, and
Yes,
he
he was.
wanted to protect our time, wanted to protect his process. I think his instincts were in the right place. I think his heart was in the right place. But
100%.
now I'm sure you've got coaches in great big high schools with lots of talent coming up, and they
Yeah.
know the drill, right? And they can make or break you if they so desire.
Charlie was up for the Nazareth job. Do you know who they hired over him?
No,
John Beeline.
really? Oh my
Yep.
goodness. So he
How
didn't
about
get
that?
his.
Have your name in that sentence.
Yeah, that's amazing. I didn't. I thought he got his start at Lemoyne. I guess he had the Nazareth job before that.
Nazareth became before Lemoyne. Yeah,
That's
he's
terrific.
coached at JUCO, D3, D2, D1, and the pros. He's amazing.
It's a classic story of the journey of college basketball coaches, right? You better pack a bag. For very few will their career be in only one place. I think Coach Boeheim and guys of his stature, I think that's the end of the age.
Right? Yeah, it's going to be very hard to find another one.
Well, look at Coach Massimino. Even he, legendary at Villanova. I don't know how many years he coached. Chuck, it had to be at least 20, 25.
He was 19 at Nova, but he coached for God at least 25 years, more than that. Yeah,
it's amazing. I
went to UNLV in '92, and then Cleveland State, and then he retired, and then he went down to Florida and wound up coaching and developing the program, starting the program up at Northwood University, which actually became Kaiser. It was an NAIA school, and he coached right up till he was too sick to coach and passed away. Right up to the day he died. Basically, he was the coach.
Well, he was doing what he loved most, right?
Oh yeah.
Lucky, right? Lucky to do that.
Yeah,
no doubt.
So Chuck, you'll know some of these names, but just to kind of ground the conversation and my contemporaries, our contemporaries at the time. Sonny was our starting point guard. Mike Sinicki, myself. Sonny, I forget who else we had on
Eddie
the back
Coban
line.
And Steve Micah.
You and Eddie Coban and Steve Mocha. Okay, so it was just Mike and I in the back in the front court and sort of a 3-guard front court. Well, long story short, we get to the equivalent of the New York State Final Four, Chuck. And it's us. It's Trinity from Long Island, starring Matt Doherty.
Yep.
It's
Ward Melville. Is that the one you played, Ward Melville, Sonny?
Yeah, Ward Melville and Adley Stevenson were the other two teams.
Yes.
Ward Melville was in our league. I played Ward Melville all the time, So
I thought it was
those guys.
I thought it was Shaker Latham with Sam Perkins. It was Trinity with Matt Doherty. It was Adley Stevenson with Ed Pinckney, and it was us. But you're right, Sonny. We lost in the semis to Ward Melville, so I might be mixing up the year that.
You and Sam, I think, were your junior year.
Yeah, that's right. So anyway, it was a kind of a star-studded, cast, and when we played Adley Stevenson, it was the consolation game, and they just ran all over us and dunked all over us. And I remember, getting introduced is the wrong word, but meeting Ed Pinckney for the first time on the court, I had no idea that, he was already destined to Villanova, and we would see him far more than we wanted to in college. But you could already tell then he was an amazing.
Freddie Brown.
talent.
Freddie Brown went to Georgetown.
Freddie was on that squad too. Yeah, he was the point guard.
Yeah, great high school program.
So you had alluded to this, Sean. I mean, you didn't play as much in your first few years, right? And then senior year, you had a big breakout year. But when you were a junior, you guys didn't even have. You had a young club. I mean, it was your I guess it was sophomore year or junior year. There was no seniors yet. The older guys were all juniors, like Leo and
we had one senior.
Who was the senior?
So I'll give you my take on it.
Ronnie Payton was the only senior.
That's right. But I was sort of always a tweener. So the truth is, Chuck, I got a fair amount of time as a freshman and sophomore because Danny Shays and then Andre Hawkins were playing center, and they were a little foul prone. And so I was
more than a little.
Yeah, I was hardly the quintessential center, but I was the guy that coach would put in when they did get in trouble. And then, by the time I became a junior, Leo and Tony and Eric were, the big three, and they were hitting on all cylinders. And we had Raphael had showed up, and he was a great player.
And Wendell, yeah.
We Andre maybe wasn't in foul trouble as much, and so the playing time was a little bit harder to come by. But that's just the way it was. And I think for kids now that don't stay at school for more than a year or two, it kind of doesn't matter. But back then, over the 3 or 4 years, you're going to have, as you guys know, some years where you have more opportunities and some where you have less. But it's just the way it worked out.
Yeah, your game. I liked your game back when we were playing because you played full speed all the time. You hustled all the time. You were a lunchbox guy. That's what they called it back then. I think all three of us were lunchbox guys, where
Yeah,
you went to work every day and got the job done, but you filled the lane and ran the court. And I guess if you have a guy like Pearl with the basketball, it gives you a little added incentive to get out on the fast break, right, Sean?
that's exactly right. Everything kind of came together that year, and it was largely because of Dwayne, right? He was such a catalyst and what he could do with the ball and the way he could make the offense go. But all you had to do was fill the lane and get to the wing or get down underneath the basket. And if he wasn't going to make something happen on his own, he was going to find you.
Yeah,
And if you were open on the baseline or open at the wing, which is typically where Raphael and I would be, you were going to get a decent shot. And the 3-point line wasn't in play yet then, so
right.
we were all still comfortable with the mid-range game. Teams would largely try to go inside, especially if they had good big men down low. But he opened up the whole game for all of us. I mean, it was just amazing to be able to play with him one full year in that capacity. That was just sheer joy. I mean, he made the whole year just so much fun. He
He
really did.
made it easy, right? I mean, I've played against him in high school and in college and after college, at Kutch's, at the Maurice Stokes game. But he made the game. Like you say, if you got to the right spot, you'd get the ball. But you better catch it,
That's
but
right.
you'll get
Yeah.
the ball.
Sometimes
Yeah,
you
but
didn't know
Sean,
where it was coming from or how it was going to get there. But
but I will. But Sean, your game changed right in high school. Back to the basket, right? You
that's
were on
right.
that, and all of a sudden, you developed like that Lewis Orr, that 15-foot jump shot. And I remember you talking about like you was he an influence on your change in the game?
Well, I think, the reality is, as all of us move up, from junior high to high school and college
Yeah.
and so forth, the competition heats up dramatically, the physical talent, right? The size, the skill. And so, yeah, I was a pretty good big man in high school, but, 6'8", maybe 6'9", at a school like Syracuse, there's a lot of big boys, 6'9", 6'10", 6'11", that were bigger, stronger, and better than me down low. So, fortunately, the way, Coach Behan used to like to run offense, which was a little bit more wide open, he was not uncomfortable with using a forward or a center to draw the other team's big men away from the basket. So if you could hit a 15 to 18-foot shot, you were a threat. They had to think about you, and it opened up the game a little bit for us. And yeah, I probably saw that, Sonny, when I was in high school. I remember, watching Lewis and saying, "Boy, I love the way he plays. I wish I could play like that." That's why I asked for his number when I got to camp.
Yeah, that's what I was saying because I remember that.
Yeah. Fortunately, they hadn't retired it yet. It was still available to me. But yeah, no, I think the nature of the offense, at Syracuse at the time was, forward shoot. And, big guys got to be able to face the basket and get to the middle of the lane. We ran a lot of plays for Danny Shays. If you guys remember, Danny gets to the top of the key and then he can either go down low with it, or he was so small and had such a smooth shot, right from the free throw line plus, he could drop in a 15-footer all day long. And, I tried to do a little bit of the same.
You had that corner shot though. You had that corner shot down.
Yeah, I just think that's probably
Talk
because of
about
place
playing
like
for
that, I
Boeheim,
knew where I
Sean.
was. What's that?
Talk about playing for Boeheim. What was your relationship like with him? He was a little bit surly to some of the guys, and I'm just curious as to how it worked out for you as far as your relationship with him went while you were there.
You know what? I thought it worked out very well. Um, we hardly were best of friends. Coach knew how to keep, the right kind of distance between himself and his players. But I think he always knew I was committed. He always knew I was loyal and working hard. And, I always felt that he was the kind of guy that if you stuck with him and you stuck with the program, then, he would do his darndest to give you a chance. And so in that regard, I felt like, he had my best interest at heart. And, I felt like I left school, with a good relationship with him, one that I've maintained at least a little bit over the years and ever since. But let's face it, I wasn't Derek Coleman. I wasn't Billy Owens. And, it's fair to say that I think coaches have different relationships with different players, and their relationships with the true stars of the team are probably a little different than their relationships with some of the role players along the way. I think he's a guy that appreciated, all of the guys that came through the program, but obviously he's going to probably appreciate some more than others. But I felt like he never lost sight of the fact that I was out there plugging away, and in the end, I think I was rewarded for staying committed to what it took to compete.
Who are some of the guys, if you look back on let's talk about just some of the locations that you played in or arenas. What are some of the memories of yours, like maybe your first big road trip, or what are some of
Yeah,
the competition that you went up against?
that's a great question because Sonny, you tend to forget the games that didn't go well,
Right.
either for the team or you, and so you tend to remember the ones that did. But the first big road trip, well, I should back up because, as you guys know, back then, the Big East was 8 or 9 schools,
Yeah.
and except for the occasional non-conference game, you were not leaving the Northeast.
Right.
It was New York, Philly, Boston, Providence, maybe Pittsburgh.
Yeah.
Washington to play Georgetown. That's it. And so, my senior year, I don't think we went beyond that until we got to the Sweet 16 in Atlanta.
Right.
East Regional. But my freshman year, the first big road trip I can ever remember was we went to the Rosemont Horizon to play DePaul when Mark Aguirre was still the star of
Mark
that team.
Aguirre,
I was a
right.
freshman, and he gave us a rough afternoon. That was a featured game on CBS television, but it was I don't know when it got scheduled, but obviously it had been on the schedule, and it was a great test for us, and it was big time. I knew when we got out there, like, wow, you're playing against probably one of the best teams in the country and clearly the best player in the country at the time. That didn't work out well for us. I think we almost got them back when they came to Syracuse the following year. That's another story.
Without Aguirre, though.
Yeah, without
Terry
Aguirre.
Cummings was the guy, right?
I remember that trip. I remember the trip to the Madison Square Garden. For all the Big East tournaments, those are the ones that probably stand out the most.
Yeah.
I had a couple good games against Providence along the way, so I felt like that was a friendly place to go play. BC was hit or miss. Georgetown was tough. Chuck, I think, we felt like you did about us. We probably couldn't beat them there, and we had a shot at beating them in Syracuse, and that's how it played out. In the end, over my tenure, I know they beat us more than we beat them, but we kind of held our own at home, and we eventually held our own against them in the Big East title game in '84. But
Yep.
it wasn't
You
quite
did.
enough to win.
But talk about that rivalry now that you mentioned the Hoyas, because since we've been doing this, we've had a lot of the guys on from '84, '85 era. We're talking with Ed Spriggs and Eric Smith on Sunday, so we're going to
Great.
have those guys on. So talk about the rivalry and from your perspective, how that went.
I remember my freshman year before, we always had a pregame meal, and then coach would come in and spend a little time with us before we broke. It was always 4 hours before tip time. And it was the first time we were playing Georgetown. It was at home. And the rivalry was all born from, that infamous day when, Georgetown ended Syracuse, the Syracuse home streak at Manley Fieldhouse on the last game they would ever play at Manley Fieldhouse. And so that was the source of a lot of the bitterness. But I remember Coach Boeheim talking about the fact that, this is a team he wanted to beat. And I almost sensed that he got just a little bit emotional in the way that he talked about it. And in that moment, he was passing on, his passion to all of us. The older guys already kind of got it, but the younger guys, weren't yet steeped in it. And of course, in that first year, they didn't have Patrick yet. But the rivalry was already, let's just say evolving and becoming stronger, not weaker. And then when Patrick showed up, it just rose to a whole new level. And we had some hard fought real hard fought battles against them. And, you guys know the history. Everybody that's watched the Big East knows the history. But I would say that there was no love loss. And maybe some of the most intense practices, maybe some of the most intense talking tos, certainly before and even after games that didn't go well, always came before and after Georgetown. There was no doubt the coaches wanted to win that game, and they instilled that in us. And of course, the players took on the rivalry themselves, and the physicality of the game. I saw Dwayne on the. Funny enough, I saw the 30 for 30 the other day on ESPN. I was in a hotel, and I just happened to be looking for something to watch, and there it was, the Requiem for the Big East. And so I watched a few minutes of it. And one of the clips I saw was when Dwayne was talking about, how much he hated Georgetown and how much this rivalry meant to us. He accused them of being a dirty team. I think Patrick came back and retorted, we weren't dirty, but we were physical. And he was absolutely right. So there was no doubt about it. That was our number one rival. We respected Villanova. We respected St. John's. There was a lot of great teams in the Big East, but, how we felt and how we did all came down to, whether or not we could actually play Georgetown as well as, we were capable of. When I was a senior, they beat us both games in the regular season, and I'm sure one pretty handily. One was probably mediocre. And, obviously not happy that we didn't beat them in the title game in '84, but am proud that we played them too, in keeping with our capability and then some. And that's the way it should have been. Hey, they were a great team. They won the national title that year. So there was no shame in losing to them as long as we played our best. And in that third game, we really did. I could say that confidently.
Yeah, they were good that year. I mean, obviously they won the whole thing, but
they were phenomenal, right? And they
were
probably could
dominant.
have won the thing all 4 years Patrick was there, but they didn't quite do that.
I think the difference was having Mike Graham on that team and having him become Mike Graham as the season progressed. He didn't play much at the beginning, and then all of a sudden he became the enforcer, and that's exactly what they needed to keep people away from Pat a little bit.
It was a way for them. You're exactly right. It freed him up offensively. I don't think Michael was a big offensive threat, although he did a lot of great work on the boards.
Oh, yeah.
So you could not ignore him, because if he wasn't going to score, he certainly was going to clean up anybody else's misses. And he was so physical that if you didn't block him out, he was going to hurt you. And that probably just freed up some space for Patrick, and they certainly made the most of it.
So I'm going to pivot on you now, Sean, because we had talked about this a little bit before the show, the three of us. I was with Dwayne McClain today, and I told you we spoke to Ron Stewart from St. John's. So, this Big East brethren is there, and part of the reason that there's such closeness with some of the former players, not only do you root for those guys when they're playing outside of our conference, but Dave Gavitt ensured that you got to know each other on two occasions, on the luncheons the day of the Big East tournament, number one. And number two, these trips that you guys went on to go overseas to play. You and I, in different years, have played in Yugoslavia against Drazen Petrovic and those guys. And I was hearing about some of the stories today from Dwayne and Ron. And you guys went to Italy too, and you played for Louis. Louis coached you, right, on that trip?
That's right.
Talk about some of your memories of that, because those trips were great, man. I mean, I had a lot of fun on ours.
That was a phenomenal trip. The year prior, I went as an alum of the NIT after my freshman year to South America. That was a different story and a conversation for another day. But this particular trip after my sophomore year was both Spain and Yugoslavia. We spent maybe a good 10 days at least in Yugoslavia, and then finished up the trip in Spain. I'm going to guess all in, we played maybe 10, 12 games. Hard to remember, but, Coach Carnesecca was, the coach for the team. So we all met in Queens for a good solid week, I think, before we traveled. And, Coach and his staff put us through his paces. You mentioned Ron Stewart. There's a great memory. Dwayne McClain, Clyde Vaughn. I think Carl Hobbs and Vern Giscombe were both on that team.
Yep.
I think
Mike, I tell you who it is. I'm looking at the photo right now. So
Norman
you had
Bailey.
Mike Mulkin was on that team. Michael Adams,
Yes.
Clyde Vaughn, Vern Giscombe, yourself, Jeff Allen, um,
Yes, Jeff.
Got
Dwayne,
three really
Ron.
little quick guards right there.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh my
And
God. They were
it was pretty
amazing.
good. It was a pretty good squad, at the end of the day. You had some players.
It was amazing. All great guys. We all kind of bonded right away. There was Coach Carnesecca created, kind of a family atmosphere. I remember going to his favorite Italian restaurant a time or two throughout that week of, quote unquote camp. And, you could tell that we were going to work hard, play hard, but also enjoy, he wanted us to enjoy the trip, to enjoy our surroundings, to experience, Europe a little bit, even though most of us had never been there. Probably all of us had never been there. But we played well together and we had fun. And I'm going to say we all played man. There was no 2-3 zone,
Yeah.
not on that trip. But, Jeff Allen was a big bruiser. Ron Stewart was a really strong power forward. Dwayne was off the charts athletic. Clyde was impossible to guard because even though he wasn't as tall as the rest of us, he could always find a way to get a shot off. And so I think,
No.
You're right, Chuck. That experience, first of all, you develop because you're playing against other really good players.
Yeah.
The more you play and the more you do that, the better you get. But just getting to know how they played and learning from them and hopefully them learning from you, and the chemistry that develops. I remember by the end of it, we all, we're swapping phone numbers and, we're saying goodbye and, we're wishing we could do it again. And that was probably a tribute to the way Louis put the whole thing together.
Was there a Georgetown guy?
He and
Was there
Brian
a Georgetown?
Mahoney did it right.
No, I don't think there was any Georgetown guys on that team. I'm looking
I
at
didn't
the
hear
picture.
any.
No, good question, Sonny. There wasn't.
I don't think so.
It
Let me ask you this,
was-
Sean, about playing there. Now, obviously it's two different circumstances. It's totally different of playing for your normal everyday coach and Coach Boeheim, and then playing now for Lou. What were the subtle or difference, or maybe they wasn't so subtle? What were the differences with how Lou talked with you guys and how Coach Boeheim talked with you guys? As far as
Coach, obviously had a lot more time with Coach Boeheim, right, and a lot less with Coach Carnesecca.
And it was a little more serious with Boeheim too, because
Yes.
it's the real season. It's not, and that's why I said the circumstances were different. But could you have seen yourself playing a regular season with Louis?
Yes, I absolutely could. He could be very motivating in his own way. But I also had a sense then that I didn't see like the real in-season Coach Carnesecca. He was enjoying it too, so he probably was a little bit more laid back. I think had experienced him in a regular season, I might have a different answer. But obviously, Coach Boeheim could be intense when he needed to. But he also, he believed in letting good players play, and he advocated create right spacing on the floor, move the ball, don't micromanage. I would never put him in that category, and he would manage for outcomes. And if outcomes weren't positive, then he would have to get into the details of who's not where or who's not doing the job they need to do. My sense was, Coach Carnesecca was big on defense. He was big on the fundamentals. But in that environment, he didn't overmanage, the process. Good read of talent. So he knew where you would best fit on the floor and where you wouldn't. And I think that's one of the things that makes, good coaches really good. They can recognize where guys are going to thrive versus where they won't. And they don't let you get in trouble as a result. But he had Coach Carnesecca, there was 10 or 12 of us. And, he had the luxury of being able to rotate all of us in and out frequently. So we all got roughly, similar playing time. And I think he also knew that part of the job there was give guys a chance to develop. So it wasn't about just winning the game and only playing 6 or 7 guys. It was about making sure all 10 or 12, got something out of it. And I appreciate that he did that well.
And he gave you a chance to see the countryside and do stuff at these places too, right? I mean,
yeah. I remember we we'd go to a nice place after a game, and of course, he would tell the waiter there was a limit on the beer. Maybe we'd get one, no more than two before they left, and he saw to it that at least in that place we didn't break that rule.
That's
Hey,
right.
But he wanted us to enjoy it. He was there. He worldly guy, and he enjoyed it too. I remember he and Coach Mahoney, they would have a nightcap after a great game or after a practice, and in whatever hotel we were staying, and that was their chance to kick back too. So I was happy for them.
Sean, how about some of the matchups or people that you faced and went up against? Who were some of your toughest challenges on the court?
Well, when I get asked this question, Sonny, I always say, thank God we played zone. Obviously,
We've played a lot of man-to-man, though.
We did. It felt like we played more zone than man.
We might have moved into it,
Yeah.
that like your senior year, but we did play a lot of man coming in.
That, you're right, because it wasn't until later that coach kind of went more exclusively
The
to
Bay Zone, remember?
Yeah. But
Okay.
I mean, it was Patrick for sure. It was Ed Pinckney for sure. It was Otis Thorpe for sure.
What a stud he was.
He was just an amazing talent, amazing physical specimen. More times than not, it was the forwards. Just, you get stuck guarding Presley or McLean, or try to think who were the big forwards at St. John's. I didn't have to face
About
Walter,
Murphy.
Walter Berry, thank God.
Right.
But they had some talented forwards. Jay
But
Murphy was the quintessential, big guy with a beautiful stroke who could get 18 feet from the basket and just kill you all day long. He was a great player.
Do you remember playing Oklahoma and Wayman Tisdale? Or
I do.
we played the Five Slam and Jamma with Hakeem. We did see some pretty phenomenal non-league teams.
We did. Thankfully, both those games are home. In fact, the year that we beat Houston in the Kerins Dome, I'll never forget. It was my junior year. They went on to lose to NC State in the final, and I think until then we were the only other team that had beat them.
Yep.
And it was one hell of a game because they had Hakeem, they had Drexler, they had Mishaw. Trying to think who else they had. Phenomenal team. But it was our day, and we were firing on all cylinders. Same thing with Oklahoma and Wayman Tisdale. We didn't win that game, but we played him pretty damn well, considering he probably was one of the top 5 players in the country. I don't think there was a lot of defense played in that game. If memory serves, it was like 96 to 92 or something like that when all's said and done. But thanks.
We played North Carolina twice, Brad Doherty and Perkins and Jordan, and
those
twice.
Unfortunately, North Carolina we never could quite get in the same zip code with, but we certainly did with Oklahoma, Houston, DePaul.
Terry Cummings was a stud.
But the Carolina games were ultimately never in doubt. I think we hung with them my senior year through the first half. But it didn't take long. They were a machine.
Yep. All right, now Sean, you got to tell a little bit of some Daryl Dawkins stories.
But you get drafted by the Nets, right? But
you got to tell us some Daryl.
But you had to have played,
Because I remember you telling me that summer.
Before.
I couldn't stop laughing.
Well, Sonny, there's probably some I can tell and some I can't tell.
Right.
Chuck, I had a cup of coffee with the Nets, right? I was drafted in the 6th or 7th round. This is back when the NBA draft was 10 rounds. Not 2, right? And I'll never forget, because back then, unless you were represented by an agent, i.e. you were more or less a first-round draft pick, you would sign the rookie minimum contract, and the rookie minimum guarantee at the time was $75,000.
That's right. That's exactly right.
I still have the typewritten.
I have mine too.
And I remember calling my mom thinking, I will never have to work in my life. Little did we all know, right? That's
exactly.
Right. And long and short of it, I'd like to think that, listen, I hung on through most of exhibition season. That team included Daryl Dawkins, actually a great bunch of players. Daryl Dawkins, Albert King, Michael Ray Richardson,
Michael Ray.
I
Otis,
played with Mike too.
Otis Birdsong, Buck
Oh, wow.
Williams, Mike Jaminski, Michael Corrin,
Warren was
and
great too.
That's Jersey
actually,
royalty.
you know who was in camp with me? He died recently. Was Oscar Schmidt.
Oh, really?
Oh,
The
wow.
same. That was the same year that they drafted him, and they drafted him in the round before me, and he was quite upset about it because he was already a hell of an international player, and
He was a superstar
yeah,
internationally.
and I think he thought they maybe should have thought better of him. But aside from that, you could tell the covers were already stocked. So I did the math pretty quickly, and unless I was going to beat out Michael Corrin or Albert King, the chances are there wouldn't be a spot on that team. But had a lot of fun along the way. Daryl Dawkins was one entertaining person. He was constantly talking and jabbering, and all throughout practice, all after practice, on the bus before the game, on the bus after the game. And Sonny's right. Some of the stories he told, I won't do justice to them, had you in stitches. He was a character. He was a real character, and he was not a guy you wanted to run into in the lane. Let's just put
No.
it that way, because you weren't gonna, if you bumped up against him, he wasn't.
He had that country strength, they used to call that, right, Sean? I mean, he was just naturally strong, that guy.
He was a beast. He was a beast, and that team, given the players I just called out, probably should have been better than they were.
Oh,
but, they lacked something.
let me tell you, Michael Ray was on. He recently passed too, and he was awesome. I mean, I played in the USBL with him out here on Long Island, and he said, "Look, big fella, just keep your hands up because you're gonna get the ball. Just catch it when I throw it to you. You never knew when it was coming. You had to run down the court like this,
Well, to your point, the one thing I would say is I was really struck by, rookies get hazed everywhere, right? Freshmen get hazed everywhere, and I expected the worst. I got to say they were all pretty decent. The worst would be those that really didn't talk to you, but nobody gave me a hard time. Nobody pulled a prank. If anything, they would say, "Hey, come with us for a beer after practice," or, "Hey, tell me about where you came from." And some of those guys took a real interest. And I thought, really decent guys, right? They're trying to make it. Some of these guys had already made it, but they treated me well. So, it didn't end the way I wanted, but it was an enjoyable experience for the time that I was involved.
And I had an experience with Dawkins because, Paul Severamis, who we both know, we worked his camps for years, and he had an event, a fundraiser event, and they had Daryl come in. So they said, "Chuck, can you pick Daryl up from the airport and bring him into the event and bring him back to the hotel?" So I do that, and so we're getting ready to go back, and I was telling Sonny, this guy had on blue alligator shoes, okay, and he had a blue suit. The jacket came down so far, because he had like 5 buttons on his sports coat, on the jacket for the suit. And it was like Big Pimpin' just walked in, okay? So now we walk into the Uniondale Marriott, and they had a sports bar called Champions. And I walk in with Daryl Dawkins. So you see these 2 monsters, 2 7-footers walk in the door and took up the whole doorway when we walked in the place. And within 30 seconds, the entire place gravitated to us and to him in particular because of his big personality. Next thing you know, we didn't buy a drink the whole night we were there. The people buying us drinks, and it was crazy just to be in his orbit, man. Because
my God,
he talked about playing on Planet Lovetron and all kinds of wacky stuff, and breaking backboards, and he was a hell of a nice guy though. At the end of the day, with all of it,
he was. Back to my comment about just the way all the guys kind of treated you. You thought that they would want to run you out of town. They probably didn't view me as a threat, so they were nice to me while I was there. But I remember one bus trip from camp was at Princeton, and we were headed into New York for an exhibition game against the Knicks, and we're all on a bus, and Daryl starts chatting up a storm, and somehow he got onto the topic of kind of the guys with the worst breath in the NBA. And
like, who discusses that? See what I mean? That's what I'm talking about with him, man.
And he said the nastiest breath the nastiest breath in the NBA was Artis Gilmore, right? And he had played against Artis Gilmore more than a few times, so he knew. And he had everybody rolling about that. And I think
Listen, I understand by looking at Artis Gilmore back in the day with the big fro and the goatee and
oh
everything.
my
He had a lot of
oh
stuff.
my God. He said if you got
Scary
within
looking dude.
3 foot radius of him, you were gonna die. He said, he said, he said, and I quote, I'm gonna misquote, but I'm gonna be close enough. His breath was so nasty. If you stuck 5 plastic toothpicks in his mouth, you would pull out 5 alligator bags. 5 alligator baggies. He said that the whole bus just broke down laughing. I mean, in only a way that he could deliver. I didn't do justice to
Right,
it.
right.
He was a character. He kind of larger than life. In some ways, I've been around Charles Barkley.
Yeah,
He can be equally colorful and
yeah.
equally inclusive of everybody around him. So, he's going to get everybody involved in the conversation, and it's always going to be interesting.
Oh, yeah, there's no doubt about that. No doubt about that. So you leave the Nets and you had a very, very successful career in business. Um, Take us through some of that and for those some of the younger people that are watching us, talk about what, if anything, you took from your athletic career and took it over to
Yep.
the business career to make you as successful as you were.
I think you take a lot from your athletic career, right? I think you guys know this. I think you take the discipline of good habits, right, and doing the right things every day, every week, every month, ultimately for good outcomes. You learn about overcoming adversity, right? Nobody wants to get out of bed the day after a loss or a bad game and face what will be a really hard practice, but going through that and overcoming it makes you better, makes you stronger. I think being a part of a team and learning that, it's really good to be a part of something bigger than yourself, right? Until you're on a team like that and put under the kind of pressure that we were put under, you don't really know what that means until you experience it. I think that stays with you, right? So hopefully we all learn to be a little bit selfless along the way. But I think what you learn most, that you carry, forward into your business career is how important relationships are with your teammates, with your coaches, with your fans, with your family, with your friends. You really learn that, life is about relationships. And that was very true, in the business world. No matter how advanced the technology gets, no matter how much money is involved in an investment, or no matter how big a corporation is, at the end of the day, it still comes down to the people, that are doing the work, leading the teams, helping the company forge ahead, and its relationships inside the company, as well as with all of their partners and customers and suppliers and so forth. And so, to me, that's what I think for me was, the most impactful part of what I took to my business career. How important relationships are in every phase of life.
When you wound up going back for a year, and I guess it was 2006, right? You went back to Syracuse as an associate athletic director, right?
Yes.
So talk about that. What was that like for you coming back home to Syracuse and being on the other side of the fence? It had to be a little weird, right?
It was interesting. I thought there was a part of me that thought, maybe there'll be a path for me in the world of athletics administration, and one day maybe I could be an athletic director. And so I was kind of toying with that idea. I was at a logical break point in my career in tech where if I was ever going to do something different, it was a good time to do it or try it. Syracuse came calling. In fact, Coach Boeheim called me and said, "Hey, if you're ever really interested in something like this, now might be a good time. They need some help in the development office." So they called me an assistant or associate AD, but I was a fundraiser, Chuck, and I was a fundraiser for athletics. Right at about the time, we put together the capital campaign for the Mello Center, among others. But that got me exposure to the world of athletic administration, the office of the athletic director, and what that team and organization looks like. And I would say, look, I had a great time. I had a great time experimenting. I was also able to do color commentary on the radio for one season. alongside Matt Park.
Well,
That made it really fun because it kind of broke it up a little bit and
Yeah.
gave me, an opportunity to earn a few more shekels along the way. But by the end of that year, I realized this probably wasn't for me. I knew that at least, hey, I didn't see myself as an athletic director one day, at least not in the near future. And that, I had contributed to the school. I had learned a lot. I had a good time doing it, but I was kind of more comfortable going back into, the corporate world, from there. And coincidentally, I was being recruited by Aero Electronics at about that time. And so, I guess things had a way of working out. Sometimes things are just meant to be, and they happen for a certain reason at a certain time. And something told me I should listen to the recruiter, and I did. Happy I did the Syracuse thing. It was a lot of fun, but I don't think it was meant to be for me, more permanently.
Yeah. And then so talk a little bit about Aero Electronics and your rise to the CEO and how that all went down.
Well, I had 18 fantastic years there. I came in a small role, a subset of our North American IT business. And without getting too far into the weeds, I
Right.
did a decent job with that particular business, and then eventually got a chance to run, our entire North American business. And that was quite a challenge in terms of, spans of control, leading teams of teams, learning what the corporate cadence is all about, learning what it means to kind of own and manage a profit and loss statement on behalf of the corporation, building relationships with our suppliers and customers. Quite a growth experience, right? And it pushed me to not just work harder but be better. From there, I was given the opportunity to run, the global division, not just the North American piece of it. And from there, I was given the chance to eventually become CEO. It was quite a journey, probably a longer conversation to describe,
Right.
all the steps along the way, but fantastic people, fantastic experience. Lots of people that I'm still friendly with today, and I hope to for years to come, both inside the company and out. But I just turned 64, so it was also kind of time for me to think about, the rest of my life.
Next chapter, right?
Yeah, and so that's exactly what I'm up to now.
Oh, that's great.
did you
So,
get Sean? You got your MBA? Did you
I
get it?
did.
yeah.
I did. Yeah. Thanks for reminding me. Along the way, I got my MBA from the Kellogg School at Northwestern.
That's no joke. Kellogg School is a phenomenal business school.
It was a really great business program. I was also working full time when I did it. And so I had to go to school every other weekend for 2 years while I was working and living in Chicago. And, the company I was working for at the time sponsored me, which I really appreciate. It was quite a commitment. 2 years went fast, but it was a great experience. And, I have friends, newfound friends, from that experience. Most of us have the friends we met in high school and college, and those are the friends that we keep for the rest of our lives. And yet here I was in my mid-30s, and I met this whole new circle of friends that I never would have met otherwise. And I'm close to many of them today. So it was a wonderful experience, and it gave me, a bigger perspective, at least when it comes to business.
One of the funniest stories you told me, this was after you'd had your job. I think you were at Ernst and Young, right?
It would have been Coopers and Lybrand.
Coopers and Lybrand. I'm
It
sorry.
would have
Okay.
been, it would have been Coopers and Lybrand.
You were going into Australia and you had to cut 40% of a work or something like that, or you were tasked with finding
Yeah.
40% of cuts, and you were worried about them shooting the plane out of the air.
I
You
was
remember
working for
that?
Coopers and Lybrand. The company had won a really large engagement with Qantas Airways.
That's it.
So
Yeah.
I effectively moved to Sydney, Australia for 6 or 8 months. And you're right, we crawled over every inch of the company looking to find ways to save them a whole lot of money. And that was quite an experience. And you're right, there were probably days we felt like we were marked men and women, and so best to keep a low profile while that was all going down. And we did. We did, but they went on to become a very profitable and successful airline from there. So I think, despite some of the tough decisions, I think we contributed, which is what we were paid to do.
Good.
So, Sean, everybody who plays college sports, and particularly the sport we played in basketball, everybody wants to make the NBA. Not everybody gets the opportunity to do that, you know,
Yeah, I
and
don't
you
have any.
have
I don't
to
have any printed list that told me 75,000. Just you guys share that. I don't have that. TC.
listen. Yeah, but we never got the 75 because we never played on the actual teams. But all of that said, you have to come to grips with that as an athlete that, maybe this is not going to work out the way you were dreamed about as a kid. And now you're going to go into business and you're going to do take a different path. What advice, and we have to get wrapped up here because we're getting up against it, but what advice would you give to a young athlete who is now at the crossroad of, do I continue trying to reach the dream of playing in the NBA, or do I take another path and go be successful in something else in the business world?
I think it's an important question, especially now, because so many kids are chasing NIL more than maybe they're chasing a degree. So I worry about that. But look, I think for me it was kind of easy. I had kind of done the math, and I looked around and realized, where I sat in the pecking order of great college players, not to mention great, professional players. And so when I got released by the Nets, I kind of did the rest of the year in Europe. I caught on with a team or two along the way. But by the end of that season, I realized, I probably didn't love the game enough to chase it in the hopes that I would one day get another shot at the NBA. It just didn't feel as passionate to me as it did when I was leaving high school and about to take on the opportunity to play at Syracuse. And I was also fortunate to have a good degree. And so I said, you know what, Sean, my prospects are probably better elsewhere. And so I'm going to go pack my bags, go home, look for a job, and make my peace with the game and move on. And so by the time I did that, it wasn't really a hard decision. I knew that it was it was a realistic decision for me. It was the right decision for me. And, the only advice I could give, to all these kids that aspire to play in the NBA is, boy, do the math and just figure out, of the millions of kids that start out playing, basketball on the playgrounds, in their elementary schools, it's less than 1% of 1% of 1% of 1% of 1% of 1% that ever put on an NBA uniform. Is get your head around that math, and somewhere along the way find a degree, and get one. I tell people that aren't as enamored with playing in the NBA or the Major League Baseball or the NHL, figure out what it is you love to do, which you absolutely love to do, and go pursue that, because I think 9 times out of 10, most everything else will take care of itself if you're doing something you love. And that's probably about the only advice I'm qualified to give. But I really worry about the kids that don't use the time in school. Maybe it's not just 4 years now, maybe it's 5 or 6, depending on how all the rules shake out. But don't use the time in school to get a degree, because even the ones that make good money while they're in school now may or may not ever get a contract that gives them more than 1 year in the NBA. And unfortunately, you learn later in life that money runs out quickly. You might have done well in college or in the NBA for a year or two, but you gotta figure out how to provide for yourself and your family for another 40, 50, 60 years, God willing. And so that requires different skills. And boy, when you go to some of these great schools, you'll never have a better opportunity to acquire skills and to learn things that will help you later in life. And it sounds old school to say it, but somehow figure out how to get that done, or listen to the people that are really encouraging you to do so and are willing to help you get there, because there's plenty of people out there that want to help you do just that.
Hey, great advice. I appreciate you coming on, Sean. Thanks. It was a lot of fun catching up with you again. I haven't seen you in a long, long time. So, Sonny's been trying to get you, and we were able to nail you down. So, thank you so much for joining us on the Big East Rewind today.
Thanks, you, Chuck. I enjoyed it. Sonny, thanks for the invite. Great to see you both. And give me a heads up on these in the future so I can figure out who else I might watch.
What I was going to say, hang out for a second. We'll wrap this up, and then we'll talk off air for a second.
You got it.
You've been listening to
Thanks,
and
guys.
watching the Big East Rewind with Chuck Everson and Sonny Sparrow. The Big East Rewind is produced and directed by Nick Chico Chorus, Daryl Gurney, and James Hapt. Check us out on the Sirius XM app, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcasts. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with a friend. Thanks for joining us, everybody. See you next time.
Thanks, everybody.